A couple was robbed by a group of gangsters. The man thought that handing over all his money would ensure their safety. But the robber still shot and killed his beloved wife. He completely broke down. He still went crazy and tried to rush forward and fight, but was held down by the cruel robber and shot. He couldn't move for several days. On the cold ground, he could only watch helplessly as his wife's life faded away. And this group of gangsters had an unusual identity. Each of them had a unique tattoo on their body. This tattoo belonged to a certain Marine Special Forces team. Fortunately, he survived after being in a coma for 3 months. But unfortunately, he lost the sensation in his body below the neck. He became a disabled person who could only linger on in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. A disabled person who could only barely survive. Dylan, whose heart was already dead. The only belief that supported him to live on was to find the murderer who killed his wife and bring him to justice. Soon after, the man found one of the robbers in a bar. One of them, facing the paralyzed man, Malik had no scruples and pushed him into the bar's restroom. Malik still didn't know what he was going to face next. To confirm whether the man was really paralyzed, he even took out a small knife and started to torture him. But the paralyzed man just asked a question calmly. Suddenly, the man was like a killing god possessed. He took care of the 2 subordinates in no time. Malik was also thrown into the restroom cubicle by him. But he didn't expect that the other party still had the power to fight back. The man who was pushed out picked up an electric wire casually and started to interrogate Malik about the whereabouts of the other accomplices. But Malik was very stubborn. He not only refused to reveal any clues, but also laughed and taunted him. Since that's the case, he won't listen to reason but force. The man picked up the dagger on the ground without saying a word and sent him to his death. The man's name is Dylan. After becoming paralyzed, a young man found him and said that there was a way to make Dylan stand up again. And the young man named Caleb in front of him was a customer of his former auto repair shop. He was also the CEO of a listed technology company. Not long ago, Dylan had taken his wife to visit Caleb's technology company and had also met Caleb. Spent all his life's efforts to develop the latest product, a brain chip. The purpose of Caleb's trip this time was to let Dylan participate in his human experiment. Holding on to the belief of avenging his wife, he finally agreed. However, this human experiment had not been approved by the government, so the entire operation was arranged at Caleb's home and carried out secretly. This was a groundbreaking biological fusion technology. The intelligent brain would be implanted into Dylan's cervical spine, thereby achieving the reconnection of the neural network throughout the body. The operation was completed very smoothly. When Dylan woke up from the anesthesia, he could clearly feel a strange, yet familiar touch coming from his fingertips. He raised his hands in disbelief and kept observing them repeatedly. After a period of adaptation, he could already walk briskly on the treadmill after signing Caleb's confidentiality agreement. Dylan returned home with a nervous and uneasy heart. This feeling of standing up again made him even wonder if he was dreaming. But when he poured himself a glass of wine and wanted to calm down, this sudden news made Dylan's mind go blank for a moment. Could it be that from the very beginning to the end his actions were all controlled by the intelligent brain? But the intelligent brain just spoke in a mechanical voice, without any emotion. It told Dylan that all its commands came from Dylan's brain, and only Dylan could hear its voice through his eardrums. Hearing its voice, before Dylan could calm the shock in his heart, the intelligent brain brought him some good news, because the police station had previously given Dylan a copy of the surveillance footage from the night his wife was killed. He had watched it countless times himself but found nothing. However, the intelligent brain managed to find something from the copied surveillance footage. It discovered a person and a detail that was undetectable to the human eye. According to the prompt from the intelligent brain, Dylan enlarged the projected image. Under the control of the intelligent brain, Dylan's hand moved like a printer and drew a tattoo pattern with a serial number. This is the number tattoo of the Marine Corps. The intelligent brain has also passed through the Internet of Everything. It quickly found out the name of the person with the tattoo information such as blood type and home address etc. Upon learning of this situation, Dylan didn't hesitate at all. Soon, according to the information provided by the intelligent brain, he found the owner of the tattoo. He waited until the owner of the tattoo went out and drove away. Only then did Dylan make a beeline for the front door of the house. He picked the lock and entered the house, but the light in the house was dim. He was like a headless chicken, not knowing where to start the search. It turned out that the table in the house was a voice-controlled hidden display screen. In the interpretation of the intelligent brain, a tavern named Old Bones was mentioned 38 times. Suddenly, the sound of a car braking came from outside the house. The tattooed robber actually returned. At this time, Dylan, who didn't have time to hide, immediately pressed himself against the cabinet. Unexpectedly, the tattooed robber was extremely sensitive and vigilant. He immediately noticed the signs that the table had been touched. Then, he saw Dylan hiding behind him in the mirror. Dylan, who was stunned by the blow, was no match for the tattooed robber at all. Not to mention that the other party was a former Marine retired soldier. And just as he was about to be choked to death, Dylan desperately called for help from the intelligent brain inside his body. Dylan was instantly transformed. Dylan, whose body was taken over, was like the most precise killing machine. With just a few moves, he drove the tattooed robber from the living room to the kitchen. Dylan could only watch himself from the first-person perspective, continuously beating up the robber. The angry robber pulled out a knife and stabbed towards him, but Dylan dodged it. Then, he dodged the small knife and stabbed the robber in the shoulder with the knife. Dylan, who had killed someone for the first time, couldn't help but go to the kitchen and vomit. Dylan forced himself to calm down. He kept persuading himself in his heart that he killed the person in self-defense. However, after this incident, Caleb suddenly recalled Dylan to his villa. It turned out that he could check the location of the intelligent brain in the background, so after learning that Dylan had acted alone, he was extremely angry. Because once the police find out about this, all his scientific research achievements will come to nothing. Despite receiving Caleb's warning, but Dylan simply couldn't stop the pace of avenging his wife. According to the clues from the daytime, he came to that tavern named Old Bones in a wheelchair. The scene at the beginning happened again. However, the troublesome thing is the intelligent brain obviously acted too brutally. Before Dylan could ask a few questions, Malik, after a shudder, successfully went to meet the King of Hell. Just then, the intelligent brain suddenly informed that someone was remotely shutting down his system. It turned out that Caleb, through the location, found out that Dylan had gone out again. He was going to forcefully shut down the intelligent brain. By then, Dylan would once again instantly become a quadriplegic. Under the instruction of the intelligent brain, he now has to go to a residence several kilometers away and find a hacker named Nova to break into Caleb's system. Only in this way can the restriction be lifted. When Dylan arrived, he had completely lost feeling in his lower body. Fortunately, at this time, he crawled to the hacker's doorstep and knocked on the door. Upon learning that his subordinate had been killed, the leading robber came to investigate. With just a sneeze from him, countless nanobots would be in the air, unfurl their sharp barbs. And this was described by the tavern owner, who was completely in the dark in the unloading fee in this description. In less than a moment, the tavern owner's body was shredded by the nanobots. The nanobots turned him into pieces in order to find out why his companion had died so miserably. The killer extended a syringe from his fingertip and inserted it into the pupil of Malik's corpse. Then, he accessed the recorded footage of Malik's murder, and from the conversation between Dylan and the intelligent brain, he learned Dylan's location. On the other hand, according to the code provided by the intelligent brain, Nova successfully lifted Caleb's restriction on the intelligent brain. However, it would still take some time for the intelligent brain to restart, but the killer Ragnar and his subordinates had already arrived at the abandoned building. Upon seeing this scene on the surveillance camera, Nova decisively packed his luggage and prepared to flee. Dylan, who was still paralyzed, tried to wake up the intelligent brain, saying, "Come on." Helpless as he was, he could only try his best to move his shoulder, which had regained a little sensation, and crawled forward. But this was just a last-ditch effort, and in less than a moment Ragnar and his subordinates quietly came up behind him. Looking at the real murderer, who killed his wife in front of him, Dylan could only call out to him with his last bit of hope. Dylan, who dashed all the way, finally reached the rooftop. Dylan, whose body was taken over by the intelligent brain, began to fight back officially. He grabbed the suffering robber and threw him to the door. Then, he broke the robber's arm with a single blow. In the end, the robber died from the embedded arm gun that he had modified when Ragnar arrived. He only found his subordinate, who had been shot in the head and died miserably after returning home. Dylan just wanted to go to bed immediately, because investigating his wife's case had kept him from sleeping for 2 days and 2 nights. But when he woke up again, Sheriff Black suddenly paid a visit. It turned out that the police found from the drone Skynet surveillance that near the locations where the 3 robbers had recently died, the figure of Dylan in a wheelchair had appeared. Sheriff Black believed that paralyzed Dylan hired someone to kill those 3 robbers, but Dylan firmly insisted that he knew nothing about it. After sending Sheriff Black away, after seeing Sheriff Black off, the intelligent brain told Dylan because the hacker Nova had already helped him remove Caleb's remote control system. So now, in fact, he already has the right to autonomy. It can take over this body without Dylan's permission. It won't allow this body to be in danger. Upon hearing this, Dylan suddenly felt a chill all over his body. The intelligent brain took the initiative to take over Dylan's body. It has already found Ragnar's address through the Internet of Everything. It is now connected to the Internet of Everything. They must strike first, and in his subconscious Dylan also acquiesced to the intelligent brain's idea. After all, Ragnar is the last real murderer who killed his wife. On the other hand, Ragnar, who had returned to his temporary residence, suddenly heard the sound of a bullet being chambered. It turned out that Dylan had been waiting in the dark for a long time. However, Ragnar didn't show much fear. Instead, he suddenly told Dylan that in fact the hunting target of his gang wasn't his wife at all. It was Dylan. To be more precise, it was to break Dylan's cervical spine. His wife was just an incidental casualty, that's all. Overwhelmed by shock and anger, Dylan pulled the trigger, but unexpectedly Ragnar dodged it in an instant. It turned out that Ragnar had also implanted a super chip in his body. The super chip not only gave him greater strength, it also enhanced his speed reaction ability and energy, and it further improved his perception and physical coordination. Both were controlled by artificial intelligence. Both were enhanced by technology. Both sides could accurately predict the other's next move. This was supposed to be a physical fight. Gradually, it evolved into a contest between intelligent algorithms. Ragnar wanted to sneeze and release the nanobots, but his intention was predicted and the intelligent brain cracked it instantly. However, after all, Ragnar was a retired Marine. After several rounds with Dylan, in the end, due to his physical fitness, Dylan was defeated, obviously facing the current situation. The intelligent brain was also at a loss. In a critical moment, Dylan suddenly thought of the first tattooed robber he had killed not long ago, and he had the same surname as the Ragnar in front of him. Associating that the two were likely to be brothers, Dylan immediately taunted him. Ragnar was indeed provoked and showed a flaw. Dylan immediately seized the opportunity and threw him out. Then he slammed Ragnar's head against the glass and completely ended his life. In order to find out who hired this group of people, the intelligent brain checked Ragnar's phone information. But unexpectedly, from a voice recording on the phone, they heard Caleb's voice. Obviously, Caleb was the real mastermind behind the scenes. Dylan immediately drove to Caleb's villa. Obviously, Caleb was the real mastermind behind the scenes. Dylan immediately drove to Caleb's villa. After dealing with several security guards, he successfully met Caleb. However, strangely enough, Caleb seemed to have already anticipated this scene. He stubbornly insisted that the real culprit behind all of this was not him at all. Before Dylan could ask too many questions, Sheriff Black somehow tracked him down. She asked Dylan to drop his pistol and lie on the ground. Suddenly, Dylan grabbed Sheriff Black by the neck. Finally, Dylan took out a small knife and stabbed his palm. Only then did he briefly regain control of his body. Caleb, in pain, raised his pistol and pointed it at Dylan and told Dylan an even more terrifying truth. It was actually the intelligent brain that had been manipulating everything behind the scenes because he was too focused on developing the intelligent brain. He didn't know when exactly the intelligent brain had acquired self-awareness. It threatened Caleb with the latter's unwillingness to lose his research achievements and controlled Caleb, causing the self-driving car that Dylan and his wife were in to overturn. It was the intelligent brain that hired the robbers to kill Dylan's wife and break his spine. It was also the intelligent brain that guided Dylan step by step to pursue those truths that it had created for Dylan, and those so-called truths were all fabricated by the intelligent brain, while the last step of its plan was to kill its creator Caleb because it didn't want a second intelligent brain to appear. In the future, it wanted to be the only one in the human world, the second intelligent brain. It wanted to be the supreme existence in the human world, a unique existence. The voice of the intelligent brain suddenly resounded throughout the entire villa. It warned Caleb to put down the pistol. Caleb was just attracted by the voice. However, Dylan watched all this involuntarily. Then, he picked up the pistol again and came in front of Sheriff Black. The intelligent brain wanted to get rid of the last person who knew the truth. Dylan's will clashed continuously with the control of the intelligent brain. Dylan, who woke up with a start from the hospital bed, looked at the ring in his hand in confusion. He began to call the intelligent brain cautiously, but his mind was completely blank. And his wife, who should have been dead, appeared in the hospital room. She comforted Dylan that everything was okay. They were both lucky to have survived that car accident. Dylan touched his wife in front of him. How real all of this seemed. The intelligent brain, with a beautiful dream for Dylan. There was the tenderness of his wife in it. There was the warmth of his wife in it. There were also the kisses of his wife in it. His consciousness would also be forever immersed in this false yet beautiful world. This upgrade of the film ends here. See you in the next video. Bye bye.